You know those days that feel like they'll never end? Where every task drags on and by the time evening rolls around, you're completely drained? That's exactly how I felt that particular Thursday. The office had emptied out hours ago, leaving just the hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional creak of the building settling into nighttime silence. I was gathering my belongings, mentally exhausted, when a familiar voice cut through my fog of fatigue. "Emma, still here?" I glanced up to see Daniel standing in the doorway. He was the CEO's son, though you'd never know it from how he carried himself. There was something genuine about him, an authenticity that made people feel comfortable in his presence. I managed a tired smile and nodded. "Yeah, just wrapping up. I'll call a car service in a minute." He shook his head, that easy smile spreading across his face. "No need for that. I'm headed in your direction anyway. Come on, I'll give you a lift." There was something in his voice, a sincerity that made it impossible to refuse. Truth be told, I'd noticed him around the office before. He had this quiet magnetism, never demanding attention but somehow always present in a meaningful way. A few minutes later, we stepped into the cool evening air. A light rain had started, creating a shimmer on the asphalt that caught the streetlights. Droplets touched my face as we walked to his car, and I caught the scent of rain-soaked pavement mixing with the subtle fragrance of his cologne as we settled into the leather seats. At first, our conversation stayed surface level, standard stuff about work projects, the unpredictable weather, traffic patterns in the city. But as we merged onto the expressway, something began to shift. His voice took on a different quality, more intimate, more genuine. He started asking real questions. Not the polite small talk you make with colleagues, but actual curiosity about who I was beyond my desk and computer screen. "So, what do you do when you're not conquering spreadsheets and meetings?" he asked, with a slight grin. I found myself opening up in ways I hadn't with anyone in months. Stories about my passions, my struggles with work-life balance, the little dreams I kept tucked away. And here's the thing that caught me off guard. He wasn't just being polite. He was genuinely listening. You know that kind of attention, right? When someone's eyes meet yours and you can tell they're actually processing every word, not just waiting for their turn to speak. It created this warmth in my chest that I hadn't expected. I turned to look out the window, watching the rain transform the cityscape into something almost magical. The lights blurred into streaks of gold and blue, and I found myself thinking how strange it was that something so ordinary, a simple ride home, could feel so profound. As we got closer to my neighborhood, the energy in the car had completely transformed. What started as friendly collegiality had evolved into something else entirely, something unspoken but mutually acknowledged, something that made my pulse quicken just slightly. We pulled up along my street, the rain now barely a whisper against the windshield. I turned to thank him, and in that moment our hands brushed accidentally. It was brief, maybe half a second, but the sensation was electric, a spark that was simultaneously gentle and intense, making my breath catch. He met my eyes with this knowing smile, an understanding passing between us without a single word being spoken. As I stepped out of the car and watched him disappear into the night, I felt this strange cocktail of emotions bubbling up. Excitement, wonder, curiosity. What had just happened? Was it nothing, or was it the beginning of something significant? I couldn't say for certain, but that drive, that connection, stayed with me long after I'd closed my front door. It hit me then, standing in my quiet apartment. Sometimes the most remarkable experiences hide in the most mundane moments. The next morning arrived with that drive still occupying prime real estate in my mind. Even my morning coffee ritual felt different, like the entire world had been repainted in slightly brighter colors overnight. I kept replaying moments from the previous evening, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, how he'd leaned in slightly when I spoke, as if he didn't want to miss a single word, that fleeting touch of our hands that had sent electricity through my entire body. At the office, everything looked normal on the surface. The usual symphony of ringing phones, clicking keyboards, and hurried conversations filled the air. But I found myself seeing Daniel through an entirely different lens. When he arrived that morning with his characteristic ease, I noticed details I'd overlooked before. The way his whole face lit up when he laughed, the slight tilt of his head when something genuinely captured his interest, the deliberate way he moved through the space, never rushed, always present. During lunch, I settled into my usual spot at the small cafe across the plaza. I told myself I wasn't hoping he'd show up, but let's be honest, I absolutely was. And when he did, sliding into the seat across from me with that casual confidence, it felt somehow inevitable, like the universe had been conspiring to bring us together all along. "You seemed a million miles away during the morning meeting," he said, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "Maybe I was," I admitted, stirring my tea absently. "I've had a lot on my mind lately." He nodded, and there was this moment of silent understanding between us. No need for elaborate explanations. After that, conversation flowed like water finding its natural course. We talked about everything and nothing, deeper than before, but still comfortable, still respectful. He didn't push for information or try to rush anything. He simply shared pieces of himself in a way that made me feel safe doing the same. By the time lunch ended, I realized I'd been laughing more genuinely than I had in months. My cheeks actually hurt from smiling. That evening, as I walked toward my car, there was this electric sense of anticipation humming through me. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, or even if I wanted anything to happen, but something was pulling at me, an invisible thread connecting us. And then, as if my thoughts had summoned him, his car pulled up alongside mine. "Heading home?" he asked through the open window, as casually as if we did this every day. I hesitated, caught between my usual preference for solitude and this growing curiosity about where this connection might lead. Finally, I nodded. "Yeah, I suppose I am." The rain had returned, creating a soothing percussion against the windshield. City lights stretched and blurred into ribbons of gold as we drove. At first, neither of us spoke much, but the silence wasn't awkward. It was comfortable, loaded with possibility, like a secret we were both keeping. I glanced over at him, studying the calm concentration in his expression, the relaxed way his hands rested on the steering wheel. There was such ease in his presence, a quiet respect that made something in my chest tighten unexpectedly. We reached a peaceful stretch of road lined with trees, their leaves glistening with fresh raindrops caught in the streetlights. Without planning it, I found myself asking, "Do you ever feel like something unexpected can change everything?" He looked at me thoughtfully, those dark eyes searching mine. "Absolutely. Sometimes it's a small thing. Sometimes it's a person. But when it happens, you know it." Those words hung between us, soft yet weighted with meaning. I realized then that this was about more than simple attraction or casual interest. Something deeper was awakening, stirring feelings I hadn't experienced in years. When we arrived outside my place, I felt reluctant to let the moment end. We sat there for several heartbeats, both of us aware that something fundamental had shifted. Then, as I finally reached for the door handle, there was this subtle, almost electric connection that neither of us tried to name just yet. That night, lying awake in bed, I thought about him, about the drive, the rain, how a simple gesture of kindness had unfolded into something unexpected and profoundly moving. I couldn't predict what would happen next, but for the first time in years, I felt a sense of possibility I'd forgotten existed. The days that followed brought an unusual blend of anticipation and normalcy. At work, everything appeared unchanged on the surface. People went about their routines, deadlines loomed, meetings ran long. But for me, everything felt transformed. Every time I saw Daniel in the office, there was this flutter in my chest I hadn't anticipated. Nothing dramatic or obvious, just subtle, like a breeze stirring the hair at the back of your neck, impossible to ignore. We found small ways to connect throughout each day. A shared moment of humor during a tedious presentation. Quiet conversations near the coffee station. Occasional text messages exchanged over lunch breaks. Nothing explicitly romantic, but each interaction carried a warmth that extended beyond typical workplace boundaries. I began noticing how genuinely he engaged with people, not just me, but everyone. He had this gift for making people feel heard, valued. But with me, there was something extra, a lingering glance, a smile that seemed reserved just for me, small gestures that spoke volumes. One Friday evening, as twilight deepened to indigo and a gentle mist began to fall, I was preparing to leave for the weekend. Daniel appeared in my doorway, leaning casually against the frame, his expression relaxed but attentive. "Mind if I walk you out?" he asked, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I felt that familiar pull, that curiosity mixed with something I was beginning to recognize as hope. "I'd like that," I said simply. The rain had returned, softly muting the city sounds around us. We walked side by side through the parking garage, our footsteps echoing in sync. An ease had developed between us, a sense of trust that had grown from those first shared drives, and quietly strengthened with each conversation, each smile, each moment of connection. At my car, we paused. He turned to face me fully, and for the first time, all pretense of professional distance seemed to evaporate. I felt a gentle courage rising within me, as if the world had contracted to just the two of us and nothing else mattered. "You know," he said softly, "I keep thinking about what you asked me, about unexpected moments changing everything." "And?" I prompted, my voice barely above a whisper. I think some things are meant to happen. They're not really unexpected at all. They're just waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. My heart was racing now. What are you saying? He smiled, slow and knowing, that expression that always made my knees weak. I'm saying that driving you home that first night wasn't random. I'd been wanting to talk to you, really talk to you, for months. I just needed an excuse. The confession hung in the air between us, honest and vulnerable. I felt my own walls crumbling, the protective barriers I'd built around my heart starting to dissolve. I'm GL. You found one, I said, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. The drive to my place that evening was quiet, but charged with an energy that had been building for weeks. We communicated through small, deliberate gestures. A light touch on my hand when he shifted gears, shared laughter over a song on the radio, glances that lingered just a heartbeat longer than necessary. It was gradual, tender, respectful, an emotional intimacy that neither of us had forced, but that had grown organically from genuine understanding and mutual regard. When he pulled up outside my house, the connection between us felt undeniable, yet still beautifully unrushed. He didn't try to push for more or demand definitions. He simply looked at me with warmth and care, as if he could see right into my soul and appreciated everything he found there. Thank you, I said softly, those two words carrying the weight of everything I felt. For what? He asked, though I knew he understood perfectly. For seeing me, for being patient, for making me feel like I matter. His expression grew gentle, almost reverent. Emma, you've always mattered. I'm just grateful you're finally letting me show you that. The rain had stopped, leaving a peaceful quiet over the neighborhood. As I stepped out of the car, he caught my hand gently. Can I see you this weekend? Not for work, not by accident, just us? I felt a smile bloom across my face, genuine and unguarded. I'd really like that. Over the following weeks, Daniel and I began building something real. We took our time, discovering each other gradually. Weekend brunches turned into long walks through the park. Coffee dates evolved into cooking dinner together at my apartment. We talked for hours about everything, our hopes and fears, our past hurts and future dreams, our favorite books and most embarrassing moments. What struck me most was how natural all felt. There was no game playing, no pretense. Just two people genuinely enjoying each other's company, building trust brick by brick, moment by moment. One evening, about a month after that first drive home, we were sitting on my balcony watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. His arm was around my shoulders, my head resting against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. You know what I love about this? He said quietly. What's that? How we got here. It wasn't dramatic or rushed. It was just real, authentic. Like we took the time to actually know each other before diving in. I lifted my head to look at him, struck by how perfectly he'd articulated what I'd been feeling. I was so closed off before you, I admitted. I'd convinced myself that keeping people at arm's length was safer, that getting hurt again wasn't worth the risk. He brushed a strand of hair from my face, his touch gentle. And now I realize that the real risk is never opening up at all. Never allowing yourself to be vulnerable enough to truly connect with someone. He smiled, that beautiful smile that still made my heart skip. I'm honored you chose to take that risk with me. As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this moment. A simple offer of a ride home on a rainy evening had transformed into something I never could have predicted. It had shown me that sometimes the most extraordinary experiences arrive wrapped in the most ordinary moments, if you have the courage to embrace them. Daniel had reminded me that connection, real connection, requires vulnerability. It requires showing up as your authentic self and trusting someone else to do the same. It requires patience, respect, and the willingness to let things unfold naturally, rather than forcing them into predetermined expectations. Looking back, I understood that the journey itself had been just as important as the destination. Every conversation, every shared laugh, every moment of comfortable silence had been building blocks, creating a foundation strong enough to support something lasting. What are you thinking about? Daniel asked, noticing my contemplative expression. Just how grateful I am, I said honestly. For you, for this, for having the courage to get in your car that first night instead of calling a ride service. He laughed, the sound warm and rich. Best decision you ever made? I pretended to consider, seriously, tapping my chin thoughtfully. Well, it's definitely in the top 3. He tickled my side playfully, making me squeal and squirm. Only top 3? I'm wounded! We dissolved into laughter, and as I looked at him in the fading light, I felt this overwhelming sense of rightness, of being exactly where I was supposed to be, with exactly who I was supposed to be with. Life has a funny way of surprising you when you least expect it. Sometimes the person who changes everything walks into your life in the most unremarkable way. Sometimes love doesn't announce itself with fireworks and grand gestures. Sometimes it arrives quietly, gently, in the form of a simple offer, "Let me drive you home." And sometimes, if you're brave enough to say yes, that ride home becomes the beginning of the most beautiful journey you'll ever take. Not to a destination, but toward a deeper understanding of yourself, your capacity for trust, and your worthiness of genuine love and connection. As Daniel pulled me closer and we sat together under the emerging stars, I made a silent promise to myself. To never again be so afraid of getting hurt that I close myself off from the possibility of genuine connection. To remain open to life's unexpected turns. To trust that sometimes the most meaningful relationships begin not with certainty, but with curiosity, and the courage to explore where that curiosity might lead. Because in the end, it's not about having all the answers or knowing exactly where you're headed. It's about finding someone who makes the journey worthwhile, someone who sees you for who you truly are and chooses you anyway. Someone who turns an ordinary rainy evening into the first chapter of something extraordinary. And that, I realized with absolute certainty, was exactly what I'd found.